The night Lena Brooks mailed her Christmas wish, she didn't know she was choosing between silence and salvation, between fear and faith. In a town where lights pretended everything was fine, one letter whispered the truth, and something ancient, listening in the dark, answered back. Hey everyone, so glad you're here today. It really means a lot. I'd love to know where you're watching from. So go ahead and drop your city, state, or country in the chat. And if you're watching live or catching this later, say hi anyway. Can't wait to connect with all of you. The quiet in Red Hollow, Oregon, had a way of lying to people. On the surface, it was the kind of town that showed up on postcards, frost-tipped fir trees, strings of warm yellow lights drooping across porches, pickup trucks dusted with mud and memory. But quiet, Lena Brooks had learned, could be dangerous. Quiet could mean waiting. Quiet could mean bracing yourself. At 11 years old, Lena knew the exact sound of her father's truck before it turned onto their street. She could tell if the night would be safe just by the way the engine coughed. Tonight, it growled low and angry like something wounded and looking to bite. Inside the house, her mother, Rachel Brooks, folded the same dish towel 3 times without realizing it. Rachel was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with mirrors, soft eyes, gentle hands, the kind of smile that tried to shield others from pain, even when it cost her everything. She had once dreamed of opening a flower shop. Now she measured her days in moods and footsteps. It's okay, Rachel whispered, more to herself than to Lena. Everything's fine. Lena didn't answer. She had learned that pretending was dangerous too. Her father, Mark Brooks, had not always been like this. That was the part no one ever understood. He could still be charming to strangers, still laugh too loud at the diner, still hold doors open like a gentleman. But at home, the walls flinched when he entered. The air changed. Words became weapons sharpened by disappointment and drink. Lena retreated to her room, clutching the folded paper hidden beneath her mattress. She had written it 3 days ago, hands shaking, pencil pressing so hard it nearly tore the page. She hadn't known where the words came from. Maybe desperation had its own language. Santa had always felt safer than adults. She waited until Mark's voice rose, until a glass hit the counter too hard, until her mother's silence became the loudest thing in the room. Then Lena slipped out the back door, coat pulled tight around her thin shoulders, breath puffing like little ghosts into the cold. The old red mailbox sat at the edge of town, paint chipped, flag rusted down. Everyone said it was broken. Everyone said no mail had been collected there in years. But Lena believed in things that didn't make sense to other people. She believed in Santa the way some people believed in gravity. Not because it was easy, but because without it, everything would fall apart. She slid the letter inside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the mailbox hummed, just slightly, like a breath being taken. Lena didn't hear it. She was already running home. Far away, above a closed-down jazz bar in Portland, a man who wasn't quite a man opened his eyes. Elias Crow had lived long enough to recognize desperation when it found him. He felt it now, sharp and familiar, threading through the ancient enchantments he had laid decades ago. His apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old records. Outside, rain streaked the windows like restless fingers. He crossed the room and lifted the letter from thin air, the paper still warm with hope and fear. As he read, something inside him tightened. Still happening, Elias murmured. After all this time, Elias was not the kind of vampire stories prepared you for. He wore worn boots and flannel shirts, drove a dented truck, and drank synthetic blood because hurting people had never been the point. Long ago, he had made a promise to something older than Christmas, older than Santa himself. He wouldn't save the world. He would save homes. Back in Red Hollow, Mark Brooks slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Rachel flinched. Lena counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. If you've ever hated men like Mark, men who hide cruelty behind closed doors, ask yourself whose side you're on. People who excuse that kind of darkness stay silent. The rest speak up. If you believe fear should never rule a home, make it known. Only abusers and their defenders look away. That night, as Lena lay awake listening to the house hold its breath, something shifted. Not loudly, not violently, just softly. Snow began to fall, and somewhere on the road to Red Hollow, a truck cut through the dark, its headlights steady, its bed filled with flowers no one had asked for yet, but desperately needed. The snow didn't stop falling after Lena went to bed. It thickened, softening the edges of Red Hollow until the town looked like it had been wrapped in cotton and forgiveness. Inside the Brooks house, however, nothing felt soft. The furnace rattled. The floorboards creaked with memory. Rachel lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark's uneven breathing beside her, each inhale a warning. Rachel had learned to sleep lightly. Years ago, she'd been a deep sleeper, the kind who dreamed in colors. Now her rest came in fragments. She measured the night by what might happen if she closed her eyes for too long. She thought of Lena's school project due after the holidays, of the way her daughter smiled less lately, of the flower shop she once sketched in a notebook she no longer owned. In another life, she might have been brave sooner. Outside, a truck rolled quietly down the highway toward Red Hollow. Elias Crow drove with both hands on the wheel, radio off, senses stretched wide. Snow didn't bother him. Cold didn't either. What weighed on him was the letter folded carefully in his jacket pocket, every word etched into his memory. He'd read it a dozen times already, and each time it burned the same. He had seen this before. Too many times. The mailbox enchantments were old, selective. They caught wishes born of real need, not greed. Children learned faster than adults how to ask honestly. That was why the letters usually came from small hands. Elias turned off the main road and slowed as Red Hollow appeared, quiet and unsuspecting. He parked near the edge of town and stepped out, boots crunching softly. The night smelled of pine and frost. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then fell silent. He didn't go to the Brooks house yet. First, he listened. Home spoke if you knew how to hear them. The Brooks place whispered tension, walls tight as clenched teeth. Elias closed his eyes, letting the house tell its story. Raised voices, broken apologies, fear swallowed and swallowed again. Mark Brooks slept uneasily, dreams tangled with resentment. He dreamed of being cornered, of shadows watching him from the edges of rooms. He woke just before dawn, heart racing, convinced someone had been standing at the foot of the bed. Rachel lay still beside him, pretending sleep, wishing she were anywhere else. Morning came pale and cold. Lena woke early, as she always did after bad nights. She padded into the kitchen, poured cereal, and sat at the table swinging her feet. The house felt different, like the pause before thunder. She didn't know why, but hope fluttered dangerously in her chest. Rachel joined her, brushing hair from her face. "You okay, sweet pea?" Lena nodded. "Mom, yes. Do you think Santa ever needs help?" Rachel smiled sadly. "I think everyone does sometimes." At the edge of town, Elias stood outside the old diner, sipping coffee he didn't need. He watched Mark Brooks through the window as the man laughed too loudly with another patron, charming, careless. Elias had learned to recognize this type. Men like Mark thrived on control, not strength. They mistook fear for respect. If you've ever known someone like Mark, someone who believes power comes from breaking others, decide now where you stand. Silence feeds men like him. Speaking up stars them. If you believe homes should be safe, say so. Only cowards and bullies pretend this is normal. Elias followed Mark when he left, keeping distance, learning routines. He noted the liquor store stop, the way Mark's shoulders tightened when he checked his phone, the subtle aggression in his stride. By afternoon, Elias knew enough. That evening, as dusk fell, Elias knocked on the Brooks' front door. Rachel froze mid-step. Mark frowned, irritation already forming. "You expecting someone?" She shook her head. Mark opened the door sharply. Elias stood there, snow dusting his shoulders, expression calm. "Too calm. Can I help you?" Mark asked. Elias smiled politely. "Noise complaint." Mark scoffed. "From who?" "From the house," Elias said gently. "And the people in it." Rachel's breath caught. Elias stepped closer, voice low, carrying weight that pressed against Mark's chest. "You frighten them. That ends tonight." Mark laughed, but it sounded wrong. "You threatening me?" "No," Elias replied. "I'm reminding you." Something shifted then. Mark felt it, a pressure behind his eyes, a certainty that his choices were no longer his alone. Memories surfaced unbidden. Raised voices, clenched fists, Rachel's quiet flinches. Shame flooded him, hot and suffocating. Rachel watched as her husband's face drained of color. Get out, Mark whispered. Elias leaned in. You will leave. You will sign what's necessary. You will not return. Mark staggered back, collapsing into a chair, sobbing, the weight of himself finally unbearable. Rachel didn't move. She couldn't. Years of fear rooted her in place. Elias turned to her, voice softening. You're safe now. She searched his face, disbelief warring with hope. Who are you? Someone who listens, he said. That night, Mark left with a bag and a hollow look. Papers were signed. Calls were made. Doors closed. Lena watched from the hallway, heart pounding, as a stranger with kind eyes changed everything. Later, when the house finally slept, Rachel sat alone in the living room, staring at the quiet. For the first time in years, it didn't feel dangerous. It felt open. Outside, Elias paused at the gate, listening to the house breathe easier. Snow fell harder, covering tracks, beginning again. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning. The first morning in their new apartment felt like stepping into sunlight after years spent in shadow. Lena woke to the sound of waves crashing softly against the coast, a rhythm she could actually feel in her chest instead of fear pressing down on it. She ran to the window, pressing her hands against the glass, watching seagulls wheel above the frosted shoreline. It was beautiful, and she felt allowed to believe in beauty again. Rachel poured coffee at the small kitchenette, steam curling like gentle smoke. She hadn't realized until now how much her body had been holding tension. Even her shoulders seemed lighter. She looked at Lena, who was humming quietly, spinning in the living room with socks sliding across the hardwood. Mom, Lena said suddenly, spinning to stop. Do you think people like Dad can really change? Rachel sighed, staring down at her coffee. Some people can, but we don't have to wait for that to be safe. Her words were firm, but her eyes betrayed the lingering worry. What matters is that we protect ourselves, Lena. That's what you did with your letter. Lena smiled faintly. I guess Santa did help. Or someone like him. She didn't know the half of it. Elias was watching from the distance, a silent guardian in the shadows of town, making sure Mark Brooks never returned. By afternoon, Lena ventured outside for the first time in a week. The snow was heavier now, each flake dissolving on her mittens. Children ran past her, shouting and laughing, their cheeks red from cold and joy. She smiled genuinely for the first time in a long while. This, freedom, felt like a taste she hadn't known she'd been starving for. Rachel stepped out behind her, holding a small bag of groceries. I've been thinking, she said, tucking Lena's scarf tighter. Maybe it's time we finally do something we've always dreamed of. Open a small flower stall. Something small. Something ours. Lena's eyes widened. Really? Rachel nodded. Yes. It's a start. A place where we control the world around us. No fear, just life. It was that evening that the knock came. The one that would change everything again. But this time, it wasn't fear that pulsed through Lena's veins. It was curiosity. Rachel opened the door to find Elias standing there, a small bouquet of snowy, white lilies in his hand. His eyes, dark and steady, held the faintest glint of amusement. For you, he said simply, to remind you of beauty, even in the cold. Rachel blinked, taking the flowers. The scent was crisp, almost electric. Who are you, really? I told you once, he replied, stepping back slightly. Someone who listens. Someone who protects. He glanced past them, eyes narrowing as if calculating the safety of the small apartment. And I need to make sure he doesn't come back. What do you mean? Lena asked, cautious. Elias's gaze softened as he looked at her. Some people leave a mark on others, and sometimes that mark doesn't fade unless someone steps in to stop it permanently. Lena's stomach twisted, but Rachel reached for her hand. I think we understand, she said quietly. Days passed. Snow fell in thick blankets, and the small apartment grew warm with laughter, books, and the smell of fresh bread. Elias visited in the evenings, sometimes bringing flowers, sometimes just sitting quietly in a corner. He was patient, steady, a presence that didn't demand trust but earned it. One evening, as Lena curled up on the couch reading a book, Rachel looked at Elias. She said, a small smile playing on her lips, I've never thanked you properly. You changed our lives. He shrugged. I only guided. You both acted first. Courage is yours. Rachel's eyes softened. I don't know how to repay you. You don't, he said simply. Just keep living. But life had its own rhythm, and hearts, even careful ones, didn't stay untouched. Over the next week, small moments began to stretch into something more. Elias would bring wildflowers, carefully arranged, and leave them where Rachel would find them unexpectedly. He drove a small, weathered truck filled with blooms across town, just to see her smile. Each gesture, quiet and deliberate, was a language neither spoke aloud but both understood. Lena noticed the change. She teased her mom. I think you like him, don't you? Rachel laughed, a soft sound, almost musical. Maybe, but it's complicated. Nothing's complicated if it makes you happy. Lena chirped, bouncing off the couch. As Christmas approached, Rachel and Elias found themselves walking along the frost-lined pier. The lights of Red Hollow glimmered faintly in the distance. He reached down, plucking a single white lily from a bouquet he carried. He handed it to her, brushing her hand lightly. Rachel, he whispered, you are more beautiful than the world gives you credit for. Inside and out, her heart thumped, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that love could be gentle, not terrifying, that it could heal rather than wound. Lena watched from a distance, grinning, understanding instinctively that magic wasn't just in letters or snow or Christmas miracles. Sometimes it was in the small acts. The hand reached out in kindness, the flower brought without reason, the steady eyes that promised protection. That night, as snow blanketed the town in a quiet hush, Rachel penned a note to Elias. For every flower you bring, for every moment you give us peace, thank you. I didn't think we'd ever see kindness like this again. Elias's reply was simple. Tucked under the bouquet, he left the next morning. Kindness is yours. You only needed to step into it. But even as the warmth of newfound love and safety surrounded them, Lena couldn't help but feel the faintest tug of worry. Mark Brooks was gone, yes, but shadows didn't always leave completely. The world was still big and sometimes dangerous. She trusted Elias, but she also knew that vigilance had a way of being quiet, hidden in plain sight. And that was when she realized something important. Real magic wasn't just about protection. It was about courage, about taking your life back, about choosing love, even when fear tried to push it away. Outside, the wind whispered through the coastal pines, carrying promises of snow and hope. Inside, the apartment hummed with laughter, the scent of flowers, and the quiet certainty that hearts broken long ago could still learn to beat freely again. And in that moment, Lena thought, maybe, just maybe this really was a Christmas miracle. The mornings in the little coastal apartment had become a ritual. Rachel would brew coffee, Lena would make pancakes, and Elias would arrive quietly, always carrying something unexpected, a bouquet of wildflowers, a rare book he thought Rachel would like, or even just a smile that reached his eyes in a way that made her forget how heavy the world had once felt. It had been 2 weeks since Mark Brooks had vanished, and for the first time, Rachel realized she was breathing without tension coiling in her chest. Every knock on the door no longer made her flinch. Every car that passed wasn't a threat. But there was one knock she never expected. Elias, standing there with the sun glinting off the snowflakes on his shoulders, holding a small potted plant, a single white lily, its petals trembling with frost. I thought you might like this, he said softly, holding it out. His hand brushed hers, and warmth spread, faint but unmistakable. Rachel smiled, a shy, uncertain smile that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with hope. You always find a way to make us feel alive. Elias didn't reply. Instead, he stepped back and gestured toward the truck parked outside. It was old, dented, and covered in a dusting of snow, but its bed was packed with flowers, roses, lilies, daisies, and every blossom Rachel had ever loved. What is all this? She asked, astonished. A reminder, Elias said, voice low and tender, that beauty exists even after fear, that love exists even after pain. Rachel felt a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to cry, to laugh, to thank him, to tell him everything her heart had been holding for years. Instead, she simply nodded, accepting the flowers, the gesture, the meaning. Lena bounded outside, eyes wide. Mom, look at all the flowers. Are they for us? Yes, Rachel said, tears prickling at the edges of her eyes. For us, and for new beginnings. Elias stayed close, watching the mother-daughter duo with a quiet pride. Over the past weeks, he had grown fond of both in ways he had thought impossible. Protecting people had always been enough for him, but watching them laugh freely, watching them hope again, it stirred something deeper in his chest, something that made him realize he wanted more than just a guard. He wanted to be part of their happiness. That night, as the snow fell heavy and silent, Rachel found herself walking along the pier with Elias once again. The air smelled of salt, pine, and winter frost. The town behind them glimmered faintly with lights, the houses asleep under blankets of snow. Elias carried a small box, wrapped simply, and handed it to Rachel. For you, he said, a little something to remind you that you are cherished. Always. Rachel opened the box carefully. Inside was a delicate bracelet, silver with a small charm shaped like a lily. She looked up at Elias, her heart pounding. I don't know what to say. Then don't, he said softly. Just know that every time you look at it, you are loved. Completely. She could feel tears sliding down her cheeks, but this time, they weren't from fear. They were from gratitude, from relief, from the sudden, breathtaking realization that someone could care so deeply without wanting anything in return. For the first time in years, Rachel allowed herself to rest her head against his shoulder. I love you, she whispered, words catching in the cold night air. Elias's hand brushed her hair back gently. And I cherish you. Every moment, every breath, every heartbeat. Lena watched from a distance, smiling knowingly. Finally, she whispered to herself, someone who sees Mom the way she deserves to be seen. Over the next week, Elias continued to surprise Rachel. One morning, he arrived with a truck full of Judy roses, her favorite, lining the driveway. I thought you should see how beautiful you are, he said, gesturing to the blooms. In and out. Rachel laughed, truly laughed, feeling her heart expand in ways it hadn't in years. She realized that she didn't just feel safe now. She felt wanted, cherished, loved. And it wasn't a fragile, fleeting feeling. It was real. Lena, of course, was ecstatic. Mom, he's perfect, she exclaimed one morning as they arranged the flowers together. I mean, perfect. Rachel shook her head, smiling. He is remarkable, Lena. But remember, it's also because of you that we're here. You were brave. As Christmas drew closer, Elias made one last surprise. He had acquired a small estate on the outskirts of Red Hollow, a place with sprawling gardens, a cozy main house, and space for dreams to grow. When Rachel stepped onto the property, her eyes widened. Snow blanketed the estate in silence, the roses still blooming under the frost, and Elias stood there, smiling, holding a bouquet of lilies for her. For you, he said simply, to start this chapter. Rachel felt her chest tighten. Elias, this is yours, he interrupted gently. Yours and Lena's. A place where we can be safe, happy, free. Lena ran ahead, exploring every nook and corner, squealing with delight. Mom, this is amazing. Look at the flowers. Look at everything. Rachel walked slowly behind, taking it all in. She realized that safety, love, and happiness weren't abstract concepts anymore. They were real, tangible, and alive in front of her. And most importantly, they'd been gifted not just by magic, but by courage, hope, and the steadfast heart of someone who refused to let fear dictate their lives. That night, by the fire in the new estate's living room, Elias and Rachel sat together, holding hands. Lena curled up at Rachel's feet with a blanket. The snow fell softly outside, the silence comforting. Elias looked at Rachel with a gentle intensity. You are my miracle, he said. You and Lena. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that love can be stronger than fear. Rachel leaned into him, whispering, I love you. I always have, I think, even when life made it impossible to feel safe. And I will always cherish you, he replied. Every moment, every heartbeat, every breath. It was a Christmas unlike any other, a beginning that promised everything. Healing, love, family, and the kind of joy that could make even the darkest memories fade. And as Lena drifted to sleep that night, Hugging the bracelet Elias had given her mother, she whispered a quiet prayer of her own. Thank you, Santa. Thank you for listening. Snow fell thick and soft across the estate, blanketing the gardens in white and muffling the world outside. It was the first true Christmas morning Rachel and Lena had experienced in years. No fear, no tension, just warmth and light. The fireplace crackled, filling the spacious living room with golden shadows that danced across the walls, and a scent of fresh roses and baking bread mingled in the air. Lena bounded from her room, hair still tousled, eyes wide and sparkling. Mom, Elias, look, the snow is perfect. She rushed to the window, pressing her nose against the glass as delicate flakes landed on the panes. It's like magic. Rachel laughed, a sound that had returned only recently, unburdened and free. She adjusted the scarf Elias had wrapped around her the day before and turned to him. It really is everything I ever wanted, she said softly, her eyes glistening. Elias smiled, quiet and steady as always, but there was a warmth in his gaze that made Rachel's heart race. He walked over, kneeling beside her and taking her hand in his. You've always deserved this, Rachel, he said, voice low and tender. Not just the safety, not just the flowers, not just the estate, but someone who will love and cherish you completely. Rachel's lips curved into a genuine smile. And you do that, she whispered. Every single day. Lena jumped onto Elias's knees without warning. You're my hero, she exclaimed. You saved us. And you're nice to Mom. You're the best ever. Elias chuckled, hugging her tightly. I'm just here to make sure you both are happy and safe. That's the real job. That afternoon, they walked through the estate gardens together. Elias had planted dozens of Judy roses, Rachel's favorite, their vibrant petals peeking through the snow like small, stubborn flames of color. They're all for you, he said, handing her a single blossom, delicate and fragrant, to remind you how beautiful you are in and out. Rachel took it, her hand brushing his, a spark igniting that made her chest swell. You're incredible, she said, eyes shining. I only mirror what's already there, he replied, leaning closer. I just help you see it. Lena ran ahead, laughing, chasing snowflakes that glimmered in the sunlight. This is the best Christmas ever, she shouted. As evening fell, they returned to the house. Elias had set up a small surprise by the fireplace, stockings filled with tiny, thoughtful gifts, and a note for Rachel tucked among them. She unfolded it carefully. Dear Rachel, this is only the beginning. You are loved. You are cherished. You are safe. Always. E. Her eyes filled with tears as Elias knelt beside her again, taking her hand in both of his. I don't want to just protect you, he said, voice trembling slightly with emotion. I want to build a life with you. A life where fear never overshadows love. Where every day is a choice to be happy together. Rachel leaned into him, tears spilling freely now. I love you, Elias. I've never been this sure of anything in my life. And I will spend every day proving I cherish you, he whispered. Lena, sensing the moment, tugged at Elias's sleeve. Mom, tell him you'll marry him, she teased, her eyes sparkling. Rachel laughed, wiping her cheeks. Yes, she said softly. Yes, I will. Elias smiled, a deep, unguarded smile, and kissed her gently. It was a kiss full of promise, of healing, of a future neither of them had dared to hope for until now. Later that night, they sat by the fireplace, the snow still falling outside, blankets draped over their shoulders. Elias pulled out a small photo album he'd prepared, filled with sketches, notes, and photographs of the estate and the gardens he'd planted for them. I want us to remember every step, he said. Every day, we choose each other. Rachel looked at him, heart overflowing. I can't believe this is real, she said softly. After everything, it's all real. It is, Elias said, holding her hand over his heart. Because you believed in something better. Because Lena believed. And because you both allowed me in. Lena yawned, finally curling up between them, tired but blissfully happy. I think Santa really did help, she whispered, eyes closing. Rachel kissed her forehead. Yes, she said softly. Santa, and someone else who listens. Outside, the snow continued to fall in gentle waves, each flake a quiet witness to a miracle that had nothing to do with toys or wishes, and everything to do with courage, love, and protection. The Brooks family was whole again. They were safe, and for the first time in years, they could dream without fear. As the fire crackled, Elias turned to Rachel, brushing a stray hair from her face. "You are my home," he whispered. "And you are mine," she replied, leaning into him. In that moment, the past, the fear, the pain, the night spent holding their breaths, felt impossibly distant. The future stretched before them, bright and promising, full of flowers, laughter, and love that would never be silenced. Lena murmured in her sleep, "I love you, both of you." Elias kissed the top of her head. "And we love you," he said. "Always." Rachel rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, and whispered, "This is everything I prayed for." "It's more," Elias said, voice full of certainty, "because now we get to live it every single day." Snowflakes clung to the windows, the stars twinkled above, and the Brooks family, finally free, embraced the warmth of home, the certainty of love, and the quiet magic that comes when hearts are brave enough to believe again. Outside, Red Hollow slept peacefully, unaware of the miracles that had unfolded within one small, snowy estate. But inside, in the glow of firelight and blooming roses, the family who had once known fear now knew only joy, love, and the beautiful promise of tomorrow. And that Christmas, the first in a long time, they all learned something truly magical, that love, courage, and kindness are the real miracles. And sometimes they arrive in the quietest ways, answered by the most unexpected heroes. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. It really means a lot that you spent some time here with me today. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, drop a comment, or share it with someone who might enjoy it too. And don't forget to follow/subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I love hearing from you. So let me know your thoughts, questions, or just say hi in the comments. Thanks again. You're the reason I do this, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.